Hi guys and welcome back. We are here with another video for you guys, and today we're looking at maximizing your shoulder workouts. So obviously we're going to take you through an entire workout based on solely training your deltoids, but maybe a little bit of rotator cuff work in there as well. But an entire workout to look at improving on making the most of your shoulder training.
Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drip, yeah, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.
Okay, so obviously when we're looking at the shoulder, we're predominantly talking about the deltoids. So the deltoids can be broken up into anterior, medial and posterior. So that would be front, side and rear or back delts. There's also other parts of the shoulders that we can consider when training shoulders, but probably not what we're going to focus on too much today is the traps. So I tend to leave traps to when we're training back. So as I say, today we're going to be focusing on mainly training the deltoids and a little bit of rotator cuff work just to keep those shoulders nice and healthy and improve our posture. Okay, so obviously first things first, for an effective session we're going to be starting with your warm-up. So the warm-up is actually going to be the same that we did in our chest session earlier on in the week. So I'm going to tuck the link there below so you can have a click and watch that. So that full warm-up will be exactly the same, but maybe you can substitute the push-ups for a lighter shoulder press just to really focus on getting the deltoids. But focusing on improving range of motion, increasing blood flow and activation. So the same warm-up, same setup. Okay, so first things first, we're going to be starting off with dumbbell shoulder press. So obviously we're going to start with our pressing first because that's our big main compound lift. And I'm just going to show you the technique that I use and I advise you use for your shoulder pressing. Okay, so tension is key. Obviously we want maximal tension on the shoulders. So we're going to have a nice slow tempo. So 1, 2 seconds down, brief pause, up. 1, 2, brief pause, drive up. So see that slight rotation. Down nice and low. That's it. So full range of motion. So obviously there's loads of different presses that you can do for shoulders. Some people like to Arnold press, some people like to do barbell or behind the neck press. As I say, each has its pros and its cons. Generally speaking, I think this is the best way to do for overall for your shoulder pressing. What I will say is if you're going to Arnold press, just one quick thing, this isn't how you Arnold press. Because there's no tension when I'm doing this, or very little tension. So the idea of an Arnold press is to rotate from here as you press. So as you press, you rotate. Not coming down and then doing this, and then pressing. One thing you may notice as we go through this shoulder workout is that there's no targeted front delt raise. So I know this is a popular exercise for a lot of people and everyone seems to do some variation of a front raise, but generally speaking, your anterior delt or front delt gets plenty of volume when you do both your chest training with all your pressing and when you do shoulder presses. So this dumbbell shoulder press is actually our one move to target the anterior delt. Okay, so obviously we're starting with our main compound lift. So the same as with the other workouts, we're going to try and go a little bit heavier and keep the reps a little bit lower. So generally speaking, that's just an easy method of programming to follow, is you go heavier at the start of the workout with your compound lifts, so take slightly more rest, less reps. And as you go through the workout, you increase the volume, so you do a higher rep ranges on your isolated moves and have a little bit less rest. Okay, so next exercise, we're moving on to a variation on a lateral raise. So obviously this is gonna focus on the medial delt, and this is where the majority of your hypertrophy is gonna come for your shoulders. So obviously everyone is after kind of broader shoulders, and to achieve that, side raises are going to be the best approach to take. But this is a slightly different variation on the move. What we're going to do is involving an upright row. So you're going to drag the dumbbells up the body, and then on the eccentric, you're going to take it into a lateral raise, nice and slow and down. So upright row, out to the side, and down. Okay, so if you know me or if you've seen any of my videos before, you know I'm a big fan of this exercise. So I'll give credit where it's due. It's from the guy that came up with the exercise, a guy called Charles Poliquin, hence the name Poliquin raises. So he's quite a famous, prestigious strength coach. I've been doing this exercise for years. As I say, one of my favorite moves for medial delt. So it has all the pros of doing a lateral raise, but almost limits most of the cons. So when most people do a lateral raise, there's a lot of momentum, swinging. There's also very little tension throughout the entirety of the movement. So obviously we use the upright row to provide us with potentially a little bit more tension because we can load that movement up a little bit more. And then on the eccentric, we start nice and controlled at the top and then a slow negative eccentric. So often when people raise, they're kind of swinging, momentum, and then there's no real tension on the eccentric, they're just letting the dumbbells collapse. So, nice slow, as I say, upright row into the body, extend the arms out, so that whole time we're effectively holding an isometric on the medial delt, and obviously as the hands get further away from the body, the load becomes more, and a nice slow eccentric. I can't stress enough, obviously the most important thing is always technique, so don't go too heavy with these, make sure you can keep them nice and controlled. Obviously the focus here is medial delt, so you actually don't want to raise them too far backwards because that's going to take the stress off the medial. You want to be in what's called a scapular plane, which means if you can, lean forward very slightly and just bring the arms slightly in front of the body, so towards a little bit more closer towards the midline. So not all the way back here and not too far in front that the anterior delts take over. The other thing is to consider is also traps are heavily involved when you do any kind of raises, because obviously we tend to shrug a little bit. We don't want to completely eliminate the traps from the movement because then that's not going to keep our shoulders healthy. So often you see these exercises where people are pinning down their shoulders with bands or whatever it is, but for healthy shoulders, we want good scapular movement. So that means rotation of the scapula, which is heavily involved when the traps come into play and the other muscles around the scapula. So just think about, rather than raising straight up and shrugging too much, think about reaching for the walls on either side of you, so your elbows go out to the side, then straighten the arms. Often people ask me if upright rows are safe exercises. Any exercise can be safe, but you work in limitations of what your body is capable of doing. So often people get anterior pain in the front of their shoulder, which can be due to impingements or a number of different things. Obviously, if you experience pain, don't do the exercise. But generally speaking, if you do an upright row with correct technique and with good form, it shouldn't cause any problems. Okay, so now we're moving on to another shoulder press movement, and this time we are going to use a machine. So obviously that changes the stimulus a little bit. There are less stability requirements than there are with free weight, like dumbbells or barbell. It means we're in a better position to take that movement to failure. So we're going to go slightly higher reps with this movement now. So obviously this is our second shoulder press movement, and we're actually doing this after we've done the Poliquin raises. So we've done a little bit of pre-fatigue work for the deltoids. It just means that this becomes a little bit harder. But as I say, the benefits of using the machine is we don't have to stress or worry so much about technique. So it's easier to go for failure without failing on the technique and eventually or effectively hurting ourselves. So technique requirements are obviously very similar to the dumbbell press. Nice slow eccentric, straight up to the ceiling.
I just wanna lie, I just wanna lie.
So obviously there are loads of different shoulder press machines that you can use. This is the one we've chosen in this gym. There are slightly better ones, but there are also slightly worse ones. This one we have freedom of movement of the handles, which is nice, but they don't converge. So it would be a little bit better if they converged a little bit at the top, but apart from that, it's a good enough shoulder press machine. Use whatever machine you have in the gym, or alternatively you can do the same on a Smith machine. The other thing to remember with all your shoulder pressing is make sure your arse stays in the back of that seat in the bench. It's not an incline press, we're not trying to use our pecs, so stay nice and tall, nice and upright, keep that back nice and straight, don't let it arch and don't let your bum slide forward out of the chair. Okay, so moving on to our other targeted movement for medial delts, we're doing another lateral raise, another different variation. So this time we are on the cable. So the benefit of using the cable over the dumbbells is that we're going to have a better resistance profile, because we have tension throughout the entire movement, rather than when we use a dumbbell and we're doing just normal laterals. You're not really going to get any tension through the first part of the movement. It's going to get super hard at the top, and then we end up just using momentum to swing. On the cable, we're going to have resistance the whole time. Obviously the curve, the strength will change throughout the movement, but the profile is better than with dumbbells. We're also going to have a slight lean away from the cable, which means we get a little bit more range of motion while under tension. So we're not going to go too heavy. We're going to start with the hand slightly in front of the body because we want to stay in that scapular plane, as I mentioned earlier. And we're going to raise slightly in front, out to the side, to at least parallel to the floor. So the tension stays on that medial delt. And again, we're thinking about reaching away, so I'm thinking about reaching to the far wall. So I'm not shrugging up too much with the shoulders and using the traps to get the handle up. We keep a slight bend in the elbow. Again, because now we're on isolated movements, we can increase the rep range a little bit and really work towards failure because we're later on in the workout. Okay, so next up we're moving on to reverse flies. Again, so many different ways you can do reverse flies. Today we're opting for the machine, so we're in a nice fixed position. So one question I get a lot is, do I train rear delts with shoulders or do I train it with back? Often people forget that the rear delts are involved in most of your rowing and pulling movements when you train back. So when you're training shoulders, you might not need a crazy amount of volume on your rear delts as well as on your back day. Ultimately, it depends when it comes to training rear delts on your programming as a whole. If you're doing a body part split like we are, and you've got a couple of days in between your back and your shoulder day, it won't hurt to do some additional rear delt isolated movements on your shoulder day, because obviously rear deltoids, they're still a part of your shoulders. Okay, so obviously we're trying to target our rear delts through this movement, so we actually don't want too much shoulder retraction. We're trying to keep the shoulders slightly protracted, which helps us target just the rear delts and take the tension away from things like the rhomboids, the mid traps, and any other musculature of the upper back. So we're really trying to focus on just targeting those rear delts. So push the handles away from you rather than thinking of pulling them backwards. Okay, so last but not least, we're gonna finish with some rotator cuff work. Often when you come in the gym, you see people warm up with a pair of dumbbells and they're doing this movement, but this isn't gonna do anything for your rotator cuffs. As I said before in the test workout, we need resistance to go against us, not downwards. So that's just a bicep curl. So today, we're gonna go through our external rotation, but we're not gonna use it as a warm up. We're actually trying to load up the movement because we want them to get stronger. Okay, so there's many different ways we can train the rotator cuffs. As I put in the chest video earlier on in this series, we're opting for the dumbbell method today. So we're gonna go foot on the bench, elbow on the knee. So we wanna make sure we're nice and tall. We don't let the shoulder creep up as we internally rotate. We let the dumbbell fall down nice and slow inside, as low as we can go before the shoulder lifts up, and then we externally rotate to the ceiling. So nice and slow, down, externally rotate, up to perpendicular to the floor. Nice, slow and controlled. Don't go crazy with the movement. Take your time, build up the strength. It's not something you're gonna be lifting 50 kilos on, so start nice and light and build up. Focus on the technique as always. So the stronger you can get at this movement, the stronger your shoulders are gonna be, the more stable they're gonna be. So potentially it's gonna provide you with a better base to then push more weight when it comes to bench pressing and other similar exercises, shoulder pressing, etc. So make sure you're doing some form of external rotation. Otherwise in 20 years, your shoulders are gonna suffer as a consequence. Today I've opted to put these at the end of the workout just because I don't want to fatigue my rotator cuffs too much at the beginning, and then moving on to pressing exercises where they might be a little bit tired and then I might fail in my technique a little bit. Okay, so obviously that wraps up our shoulder day. So we've done our pressing movements focused on anterior delt, we've done our raises focused on medial delt, and we've done our reverse flies for rear delts. And we also touched on some rotator cuff work there for you. So we've covered the entirety of the shoulder, obviously leaving things like traps for back day or pull day. So that's it, that wraps everything up. Obviously, as we started with the big compound movements, we go a little bit heavier, and as we go through the workout, we increase the rep ranges, and we go a little bit more towards failure. So I hope you enjoyed that workout. Next week will be the final video, which will be for arms, so I hope to see you there. As always, like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
I've been getting paid, I've been eating good, I've been putting on some weight. If I got a problem, I just call my brother Faye. This is like a warning shot to get up out my face.